Oh, Yoshi's story, you were too pure for this world, filled to the brim with good nature and intent. This may very well have been the first game I ever played, and to this day I remain a Yoshi Story apologist. You see, Yoshi's Story didn't quite experience the same renaissance other Nintendo games did at the time. While Super Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time were considered revolutionary, Yoshi's Story's reception was lukewarm, to say the best. Despite this, I love those colorful dinosaurs, and the game still has a place in my heart. Poor Yoshi's Story has been criticized its whole life. People have been kicking this game down since the day it first hatched. Too easy, wonky controls, too little content. It's a list of, perfectly valid complaints. However, I'm not here to shoot any more holes. Oh no. I'm here to get to the root of the problem with this thing. You see, Yoshi's Story tried something a little weird, a little different. And this choice had cascading implications. So let's see what the developers tried, and why it simply didn't work. You see, Yoshi's Story was intended as a follow-up to the immensely popular Yoshi's Island game on the Super Nintendo. The biggest compliment that game received was the quality of its art style, and it was clear from the get-go that Yoshi's Story wanted to capitalize on this with a unique storybook aesthetic of its own. However, by this point, the playing field has changed. People cared a little less about pretty 2D graphics, as 3D games were surging in popularity due to the new tech. It was going to take more than a pretty picture for Yoshi's Story to make its mark this time, and the creators knew this. They couldn't just do a copy-paste of the original game. Though, this did prove quite successful in the future. No, they had to come up with a new gimmick. Every other franchise was reinventing itself for the new platform. Why shouldn't Yoshi? The original was a pretty straightforward game. Make it to the end of each level in the world, select the boss in the face, move on to the next. It was a tried and true formula, with in-level collectibles and good performance rewarding bonus content. While Baby Mario's screeching in your ear was a pleasant experience, the game itself was excellent and set a very high bar for its successors. Yoshi's Story was, another story, however. Here your goal wasn't to make it to the end. Oh no, it's, I kid you not, to make the Yoshis as happy as physically possible. And there's only one thing that brings lasting joy to their scaly hearts, and that's eating fruit. Tons of the stuff. It was now a scavenger hunt, and this, my dear viewers, is where it all went wrong. For starters, you don't need all the fruit to complete a level. In fact, it feels like you only really need half sometimes. This meant levels were shorter, way shorter if you weren't going for the major collectibles. Remember that the game was targeted towards younger players who definitely did not care so much about getting 100%. It also meant the better you did, the less of the level you saw, and less content you got to experience overall. So the scavenger hunt gameplay had a few problems. The creators were likely aware of this. The game was now too short. Way too short. In fact, a single playthrough for this video took me a whopping 40 minutes. This was not acceptable at the time, especially in an era where collectathons like Donkey Kong 64 would take tens of hours to even get close to beating the game. So steps were taken to pad out this lack of content. A page was taken from the Star Fox 64 playbook, a branching narrative, fitting for a game about a pop-up book. But unfortunately for our Technicolor dragons, this only led to more problems. Now let me preface this by saying there's nothing wrong with having branching paths to pad out a lack of content. The Star Fox series made excellent use of this feature, with each run-through feeling pretty unique. Story beats would change, different places would be explored, and the final boss and endings would turn out different. In theory, this was a great idea for Yoshi's Story, a game about a literal storybook containing a choose-your-own-adventure. Unfortunately, well, I hate to say it, the way Yoshi's Story uses a branching narrative is completely half-assed. You pick one level per world, and each world is completely agnostic of the others. Your selected level changes literally nothing about the campaign, except for the little text snippet you get upon completion. And this text isn't exactly enthralling either. Now, that's not saying there isn't a reason to pick one level over another, however. You see, each level has a series of collectibles called special hearts that are needed to have more levels available to you in the next chapter. While the game practically hands you one each level for free, getting all three can take a while. The implication of this is you're going to gravitate towards levels in which you already know where all the special hearts are. That's right, rather than getting nudged to experiment, you're equally rewarded for sticking with the levels you know. Limiting your choices even further is the fact only some levels have super secret Yoshis, the black and white Yoshi, to unlock. Which means you'll be making a beeline for those levels every time, as the monochromatic duo are significantly better in every way to the normal Yoshis. Their eggs have a massive AoE, they don't get hurt by eating bad food, and they get a large score bonus for eating everything in sight. Oh right, I almost forgot. The score system. So the score system is nothing new, really. It was first implemented in the game's predecessor, Yoshi's Island. Unlike most games where score was just a number, here it was used to unlock additional content. Get all the flower tokens in a level and avoid getting smacked, and you'll be rewarded with sweet, sweet bonus levels. And who doesn't love some incentives? Unfortunately, Yoshi's story is a bit lacking in the incentives department, as score once again is just a number. But the game puts a huge emphasis on it for whatever reason. Every time you beat a level, a big old chalkboard shows up showing off how you did. You can even compare your score with everyone else who rented the game at Blockbuster. While that's all fine and dandy, a big number isn't inherently exciting. Also, you'd think harder levels would imply you get a higher score, but this generally isn't the case. Which brings us back around to the first point. Outside of secret Yoshis and knowing where stuff is, there's no real reason to pick one level over the other. You'd think a level that required a lot of hearts to access would be harder, but this isn't always what happens. Difficulty is extremely random. You might as well throw darts at a board because it's impossible to tell what you're going into. The end result is that if your goal is to unlock a certain level, you're going to stick with the levels you know to ensure you get there without your favorite color getting punted down a pit. So, ironically, and using a branching path to make the game longer by making it more replayable, the developers actually made it shorter. If they just let you play the game sequentially and experience all the levels, I guarantee there would have been a warmer reception. One of the biggest complaints was the game was too easy. Well, there are difficult levels, you just make a point of not visiting them often. And believe me, there are certain levels you want to avoid. Jungle Puddle is a literal nightmare. Watching your favorite color get mercilessly bored by a giant fish is a traumatizing experience. That and the clunky controls make it an all-around bad time. Seriously, just let me move! But, there you have it. Developers trying to get creative and do a scavenger hunt led to a pitifully short game. To fix that, they tried implementing branching paths, which led to the game just not working at a mechanical level. The player was discouraged from challenging themselves, encouraged to stick with the levels they know, and resulted in seeing the same areas again and again and again. Even if you did see everything, you still have to fight the same pitiful final boss again and again. Now that's not to say the awkward structure killed the games by any means, though. I mean, let's be real here. It's a Nintendo game. The worst you're bound to get is mediocre. The levels are still fun to play, with the timeless aesthetic and mostly pleasant soundtrack making Yoshi's story a real treat to come back to, even after all these years, despite the faults. It's also worth noting the devs did actually attempt to fix for the lack of content in a North American release. A so-called melon-only run became an official thing, with a special level end screen showing if you successfully collected all of the high score fruit. Let me tell you, if you thought the game was too short and simple, try doing one of these playthroughs. Seriously, a melon run fixes most of the game's issues. You'll have to search every nook and corner of those delightfully rendered levels, with challenging minigames now being a requirement. Of course, you're still at the mercy of a Yoshi controlling like a gliding dump truck. But it was a good idea for the limited resources the developers had. While the Yoshi franchise never took another stab at doing a full-on scavenger hunt, it repeatedly revisits Yoshi's story for aesthetic influence. Yoshi's story had a ton of great ideas. It basically invented the modern designs for Shy Guy and Yoshi. I guess I'm just a bit disappointed it's not remembered as one of the greats, like its other mainline N64 brethren. Why the developers took the route they did? Well, personally, I ain't got a clue. And considering the mystery surrounding Nintendo game development, I doubt we'll ever get a real answer. Perhaps they simply ran out of time, just couldn't make enough levels. Maybe it was in development hell, reworking the gameplay over and over again. Regardless, it's kind of sad when a developer tries to mix up its formula and, well, sort of face plants. After all, game companies have a habit of selling the same thing over and over again because it works. I feel like a lack of experimentation really hurts gaming in general. So, let Yoshi's story serve as a harrowing reminder if you ever feel possessed to make a 3D scavenger hunt platformer for whatever reason, I don't know. While it might not have been a good idea, it looked good on paper, and time has showed us it definitely could have been done better. Thanks everyone for watching, and I hope to see you all next time.